Our final speaker is Jodi Prout, and she's an Education and Outreach Manager for Washington State Conservation Commission. Jodi has over 15 years of experience in community engagement and environmental education. She has worked for conservation districts, nonprofits, and public agencies. With a Master's of Science in Natural Resources, Science Communication, and Environmental Education, she specializes in connecting communities with the natural world, effectively bridging gaps to address resource challenges and promote voluntary conservation efforts. In her current role, she leads riparian communication initiatives, focusing on raising awareness about the importance of riparian buffers. Additionally, she supports conservation districts statewide by developing regional education and outreach strategies tailored to local needs.
As Rebecca mentioned, I am with the Washington State Conservation Commission, the Education and Outreach Manager. I worked for Palouse Conservation District for 7 years. And I currently work out of Eastern Washington, but my office is based out of Olympia and Lacey area, working with Bolana. And so I do feel like I am able to do a lot more of a reach of statewide in my current position, in working with a variety of ecosystems and supporting conservation districts in a couple different capacities. So we're going to be shifting some gears right now, focusing on social science behind riparian awareness and restoration efforts. And I realize that the majority of you in this audience are technicians or practitioners, but the hope with this project is to develop some public awareness on the importance of riparian areas and cultivate an interest across the public, private landowners, and land managers in restoring and enhancing riparian areas. So really lifting up the work you all are doing and getting it out there. So as Bolana mentioned, the Conservation Commission works with the 45 conservation districts through voluntary and incentive-based programs, and we provide financial and operational support to those districts. This project was designated by Governor Jay Inslee during his tenure in response to the Lorraine-Loomis Act, putting a statewide effort towards the importance of riparian areas for salmon recovery, wildlife habitat, and water quality. And it was designed essentially to be a public service announcement on media platforms and advertising avenues. So with our strong emphasis on voluntary conservation and encouraging behavioral change with land managers and private landowners, so the Conservation Commission was selected in 2023 to guide the proviso to develop and implement an educational campaign on the importance of these areas, specifically to the public and landowners in urban, suburban, rural, ag, and forested areas. So this is just the timeline of the project over the next year. This was funded on the state biennium, a 2-year funding, but we didn't have dedicated capacity until a year into the funding. So we're rolling this out within a year, and we are currently in the process of finalizing the toolkit and creative asset development that I'll go into in just a minute, with media buys running from March through May. And this campaign will be completed at the end of June, and this is currently one-time funding. To help inform these efforts, we hosted focus groups across the state last summer. We had 216 individuals express interest, 45 were selected to actually participate. And these were hosted in Renton, Seattle, Ellensburg, and Spokane. And the average age was 51 years old, with 68% being property owners, 25% renting properties. And the predominant land use types that came out of that was recreational land users, small-scale land users, and those doing forest management. So from these focus groups, we were able to get a lot of data of where folks stand in their understanding about riparian areas and the purpose really they serve within the ecosystem. And a lot of this information is not new to any of you in the crowd, but having some tangible data really did help inform where we want to take the marketing efforts and what is going to be the best message to speak to the public and to land managers. So the key findings here that are highlighted was that there's a lot of diverse views on Washington's rivers, with participants stressing the importance of biodiversity, and especially on salmon, as a key indicator of ecosystem health. And a healthy river was described as clear, cold, and oxygen-rich, with natural features supporting fish and wildlife. And while some saw that rivers were well maintained, others raised concerns about pollution, stormwater runoff, poor infrastructure, and chemicals like pesticides or 6-ppd quinone, a chemical identified to be toxic to specific salmon species. And participants also discussed ongoing conservation efforts, personal actions they could take, and the barriers that prevent them from acting. So this was all used to help inform where we were going with the messaging. This graph represents the number of participants that were motivated by those key messages, and the greatest amount identified that specific interests and values was a motivating factor, with collective impact, visuals of waterways, and personal simple actions that followed behind. And this slide highlights the key recommendations that came from these sessions. So to enhance the campaign, participants emphasized delivering accessible, engaging, and relevant educational content. They suggested including economic incentives, promoting native plants, sustainable landscaping, alternatives to herbicide and pesticides, and highlighting the central role of salmon. And it was preferred that the campaign focus on strengthening local outreach with a neighborly, collaborative, and hopeful tone, especially through social media as the main avenue. So the research that came out of these strategy sessions and focus groups shows that there's a lack of awareness about conservation districts and riparian areas. Many participants perceived buffers as being inconvenient due to the time and financial investment required without the immediate benefits being seen and not a clear understanding of the long-term gains. Additionally, there was a disconnect on an understanding on how individual actions contribute to a larger environmental impacts. Again, not new information to probably any of us here in this room, but we have the data to show that riparian buffers undervalued. Many land managers who could make the biggest impact are either unaware of them, hesitant to get involved, or skeptical of their benefits. And while the general public, they want to feel like they're making a difference, but they often have competing priorities that divert their attention away from conservation efforts. So our strategy for the campaign, we've landed on the ripple effect campaign, is to show that investing in riparian buffers ensures future benefits, and it can be as valuable as the things that we cherish now into the future. So storytelling is a powerful way to connect that human emotion and encourage behavior change. So we have selected stories that demonstrate collaboration between conservation districts, partners, and land managers. Toolkits toolkit is being created with media assets that have information and testimonials to reduce concerns. And then the strategy is to focus efforts on a sense of pride, nostalgia, and optimism to inspire action. And to reach the broadest audience of this, the campaign is avoiding jargon and scientific terminology whenever possible. So, for example, terms like riparian buffer or riparian zone may be less accessible to the general public or land managers. So we're using alternative verbiage of saying productive waterway, healthy waterway, and to prevent a triggering of regulatory concerns, staying away from the word buffer and not going into site potential tree heights, buffer widths, or site-specific conditions, but rather focusing and emphasizing on voluntary community-driven conservation. So as we know, the riparian buffer issue is complex, and this campaign, really, we only have so much time, so much energy to put towards it. So it's focusing on a few key initiatives. As I already mentioned about the focus groups, and we had some strategy sessions with partners and conservation districts. We have a working group that's informing all the messaging going through this. It's made of conservation districts, state agencies, tribal affiliations, and tribes, and providing ongoing feedback to ensure messaging stays aligned and is adaptable. We're also having a toolkit for those creative assets, and specifically this is being designed for conservation districts to use in their regional efforts, and districts will have the option to tailor those materials. And to not compete with the election, it was pushed back. The campaign was pushed back between March and May. It'll go out on various statewide media outlets, social media, radio, streaming services, billboards, and magazines. We also have a youth activity component to hopefully foster some conversations at home for that 6 to 10-year-olds taking home to their parents. And then new for the commission, we are developing a public interfacing website that will serve as a self-guided resource to direct land managers to technical resources and help alleviate a request for technical assistance that might not be available at a conservation district. So each audience is directed to this website, conserve.wa.gov. I encourage you to go visit it. It is live. All the materials have not been built out yet, but it will be by the end of February. And as I mentioned before, this is really meant to be that landing page for people to get technical assistance in either individual actions to do it themselves, or to be able to reach out to their conservation district or a possible partner that can help them. So we are using the ripple effect idea to show the legacy of generational stewardship and how long it takes for that riparian area to be established, the riparian buffer to be established, and building out that legacy. So here's kind of some visuals that are coming out of campaign. We're also encouraging folks this will be a billboard, and this is also kind of a work in progress, but this is an idea that's out there. But we will have billboards out there to encourage folks to get help with their property. And again, telling kind of that generational legacy story. And the next slides that I have here are just going through the materials so folks can see the tangibles that will be available. These will be available through the Conservation District. They'll also be available digitally through the website. So if you are interested in them and accessing them, there will be an opportunity to do that. I encourage you to go visit conserve.wa.gov and sign up on the newsletter so you can get updated when those materials come live. So this is a fact sheet that will be coming out through districts and provide this one specifically for the general public. We will have a partnering one that's specifically for land managers that's focused on cost share and incentive programs. RAC cards that are specifically for conservation, going through conservation districts. This one is for the general public. This one is for our land managers and really encouraging them to come talk to their conservation district to work on their conservation goals. A resource that has been expressed in conservation districts is a conservation catalog that really highlights practices that take away the technical jargon from NRCS practice codes as conservation districts and the Conservation Commission use NRCS practice codes and practice standards. There's been an emphasis on trying to make that information more digestible for the general public and for small scale land managers, as well as beginning land managers to new to owning property. So if we click through this, you can see that this dives into the conservation benefits of doing certain practices, directs them to different resources. This breaks it down by the locations, the farm and rangeland, forest and rivers, pasture land, and then it goes into each individual practice. We only highlight 24 practices in here, but it was designed to be something that could be handed out to land managers and then direct them onto the website for that self-service technical assistance. Yeah, and then they can just go talk to their service centers, USDA service centers or their district. This other resource here this is our youth activity guide, Riparian youth activity guide for 6 to 10-year-olds. And this is really introducing the idea about Riparian. So kids follow Conservation Connie through this activity to learn about the importance of riparian areas. This includes a scavenger hunt, how to pronounce the word riparian, and then individual actions that students can take. Yeah, and there's the breakdown of riparian, riparian. So, and then here they can identify as their own conservation superhero to hopefully spark that interest. This will also be accompanied with a teacher guide to go in the classrooms for teachers to be able to continue that conversation. Beautiful. And then there's a sticker page also included. So super fun, super exciting. Hopefully you get your hands on one in person when they are printed up here in the next month or so. The next little bit I wanted to talk about was the Riparian Grant Program. So in addition to the Ripple Effect Initiative that I'm working on, the Conservation Commission was designated as the pass-through agency for the Riparian Grant Program in 2024. So this is really where the rubber meets the road of getting projects on the ground. I get to work on the fun things that engage the public to come talk to conservation districts. And this is the actual funding that's available for land managers to get projects in. So 25 million was was awarded to the Conservation Commission to distribute out to conservation districts for voluntary riparian restoration efforts. 3 million dedicated for outreach efforts to promote new projects coming on. And this is all funded through the Climate Commitment Act and requires those Climate Commitment Act stipulations. And it is only open to conservation districts, but partners, private landowners, tribes, fisheries enhancement groups, other entities are encouraged to go talk to their local conservation district and partner on projects. Many of you may be already partnering with your local conservation district to implement projects through this funding or starting those conversations. And the goal is to repair or to restore riparian areas space for salmon recovery. And this is just a snapshot of where the Riparian Grant Program stands today and what's anticipated to be accomplished by June 2025. And this program is managed by Amy Martin, who's the Riparian Grant Manager at the Commission. And I will provide her contact information on the next slide if you are interested in reaching out with any questions or concerns. Thanks for your interest and attention. And I hope this campaign supports your existing efforts and spreads general awareness. I'm happy to take questions now, but I also welcome feedback throughout this process.
When do you anticipate the Riparian Grant Program will release an RFP?
Yes, so the Riparian Grant Program is currently live on the Conservation Commission's website. So they are accepting, their application is live, the RFP is live with the guidelines. It's go through an ongoing basis until all funding has been distributed. Unfortunately, it is just through conservation districts are the only ones eligible to apply. So if you are a conservation district, please go visit the Commission's website under the Riparian Grant Program. Applications are reviewed every 2 weeks. If you are not with a conservation district, please reach out to your local conservation district and figure out ways to partner to work through that funding source.